Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Oliver Degnan. I'm a CIO, a healthcare CIO, and I'm still deep in the trenches. And I'm dealing with things like burnout and productivity pretty much on a daily basis. So I talk about burnout and productivity and help you to 10x your productivity without burning out again. And that's critical. Take it from somebody who actually is in the trenches and not just reading all the books and talking about it.
And what is happiness for you, Dr. Degnan?
Happiness for me is, oh, that's a good question. It could be a really big answer too. But happiness is if I'm content and I know I'm fulfilling my life's purpose. And I thought about it many, many times. It's like, what is my purpose? And it took me a while to really, hone in on it and figure out what that is. In a nutshell, because I'm a very compassionate person, I had to first figure out my kind of persona, which is I'm a creative producer. Well, compassion plus being a creative producer, that is great to help people. So my passion in life is to help people, and that gives me happiness. When I know at the end of the day that I made a difference in people's lives, that when I get feedback, unsolicited feedback from them, and they actually tell me, wow, Oliver, the thing you told me 3 months ago, I actually put that to work, and guess what? It actually did work. This is really amazing. I want to thank you for that and these kind of things. That's the greatest reward I can get. That is better than money. That is better than a free t-shirt. This is like, wow, this really sticks. This is amazing. So this is really what defines happiness for me. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
That is beautiful. I love that. Making a difference is a great way to be happy, for sure. So how do you get started on this path, though? You're writing a lot. You're doing a lot. So you're in the trenches. You're a CIO. So you're an information technology guy, right? Is that the
Yeah.
I? And
Well,
get started on this.
exactly, right? So when you spend a lot of time with technology, it's easy to forget about the human side. And I think that really kind of led to burnout for me personally, what have you. And I was always the geek. I was a software developer, started really early on. I wrote more lines of code than anyone can remember. I built products that don't even exist anymore. They used to exist, right? They were really, really big. Things like Intuit, Quicken Health, like the expense tracker and things like this. Those tools don't even exist anymore. And millions of people used it, right? And so now for me, it's about going back to this human connection. Because when you're too much in the trenches and you're too much, especially in technology, it's so easy to ride AI as the senior vice president for IBM Watson Health and CTO for Fitel. I was totally into the Watson AI world for quite a few years, and it's so easy to kind of forget about the human component, the human aspect of it. So sooner or later, you feel empty. You're smart, you got the goods, you're in the trenches, you're building cool technology, but when you come home, it's like, I didn't spend my time with anybody. Who did I meet today? What were the names? What stories did they tell me? Did they tell me any stories? No, they really didn't. It's like, man, I've started feeling empty and empty and empty. Even though my title got bigger and bigger from the job point of view, I made more and more money. I got my annual bonus, which was fantastic, made more money than ever before, got some patents, technology patents out of that, met some of the smartest people in the world, but we never talked about personal stuff. We only talked about technology. We were just the geeks in the room with very fancy sneakers like shoes, but really bad jeans. We all had bad jeans and holes in the jeans. Nobody cared about it. And I hated wearing a suit too. So oftentimes I didn't wear a suit, but we were kind of geeking out about techie stuff all the time. And we didn't tell any stories about what did you do yesterday? How's your mom doing? And what's your hobby? Right? How's your workout going? Things like this. We never talked about that. How was your vacation? Maybe we asked, how was your vacation? But that was about it. We didn't go into it at all. Really, your vacation was great. What did you actually do? Right? Tell me about your scuba diving experience. Tell me about your skydiving experience, whatever it was. We didn't go into that at all. And I really started missing that. And that was important to me. The other problem was that I have 2 children. Now, today they are in college. But 10 years ago, they weren't. They were in middle school, high school, things like that. I got to be honest with you. In hindsight, I missed a good chunk of their experience because as a C-suite executive, I literally moved my family 7 times in like 12 years. 7 times. That's crazy, But back then, that was normal because the C-suite opportunities don't necessarily exist right in front of you within your zip code. Oftentimes, you have to move, and I was very much, in tune with managing my career forward and taking every opportunity to improve my career trajectory, which was really, really critical. And that's sometimes what it takes. But I tell you what, um, when I worked for IBM, I was in Dallas for a little bit more than 3 years. I was in a hotel 175 nights a year. So I used to joke with my kids, we have FaceTime sleepovers. FaceTime sleepovers. What the heck are you talking about? This is crazy. So we became really good using FaceTime and technologies, right? But it's not good in hindsight. When I really think about it, that was not good. So when I realized, though, that that's what was happening, I burned out, and it actually started at IBM. I started burning out and things like that. And I really had to leave that. And then in 2018, I, quit my job, went back to Wisconsin, where we are with my kids. My kids were at high school at the time, and I spent every day in the morning to drive my daughter first Starbucks and then school. And when I picked her up again at 2:30 afterwards, on the way back, Starbucks, home, right? And that was great. And it was during that drive that I learned so much about what matters to her and what is she's going through. I started building connections with her school environment and teachers. And I really went back to this human component. And this was 2018, early of 2018. This is when everything started changing for me. And this is really when I started waking up. It's like, ooh, I am dealing with something here that I need to fix. And there was, burnout and things like this. And I tell you what, the moment I went back to remember the human component, and I started really building out this relationship with my, halfway grown up daughter and my son too, right? All of a sudden, I realized what life is really about. It is not about the fancy big title, the big money out there. And I think a lot of people that only hone in on that, they're missing out on what life is really about. Happiness will never come from a big title. Happiness will never come from making a lot of money. Happiness really comes from the quality of the relationships you have built along the way with people and making sure people remember you. And people don't remember the projects you worked on with them. They remember how you interacted with them. What stories have you exchanged along the way? And to me, that is life's gift, like learning these stories from other people, being able to tell my own story. And I'm not holding back about my stories at all anymore. I used to hold back, not telling stories, to any stranger out there about like my own stories, my own personal stories. And that is just not good. When you start opening up and you start telling your personal stories, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly, if you really put yourself out there, this is extremely empowering to me, right? It's very liberating, and I feel a lot of freedom because of that. And so to me, that all is needed in order for you to be happy and live a happy life.
Awesome. That's beautiful. So how did you know that you were burnt out though? Did you not know until after you were burnt out, or did you know when you're in the middle of it, or what?
So here's the funny thing about burnout, and there's some scientific literature on it too. We actually do feel when we are getting closer to burnout, right? It's this constant flight or fight mode. Is basically you proactively defending yourself of an event in the future that hasn't occurred yet. You're making up a story in your mind that the future, you're not going to be safe. You're not going to be all right. You're going to be eaten by the lion, so to speak. And I always compare burnout to like this gazelle that runs through the prairie and survives the occasional attacks. But because the attacks are not stopping, that gazelle at some point starts defending and running all the time, right? And you can only do it for so long. Sooner or later, you run out of energy. So sooner or later, the gazelle is going to lay down in the middle of the prairie and say, fine, eat me. I can't run anymore, eat me. And that is burnout. It's the giving up, right? And it's the relationship that the gazelle build with its environment and saying, I'm in this environment that to me feels very unsafe. And I do no longer see a future where I can continue to run. It's because of that I'm giving up. That is burnout. That has nothing to do with stress. And a lot of people, kind of mistakenly interchange those two words. But you can't fix burnout by taking time off. It's like, put yourself in the shoes of the gazelle. If the gazelle starts taking time off, and let's say it goes to a different place where, it's an isolated place, like a little vacation resort, isolated. Now you're safe for a week, for 2 weeks, but sooner or later, you have to leave that resort again. You go back into your habitat, in your environment. Guess what's waiting for you? The same thing. You haven't solved anything. So taking rest will not fix burnout. Very important, right? So burnout is when you give up. Now, before I felt that something was wrong. I felt that I was in meetings back to back. I didn't solve problems anymore. I wasn't true to my nature in terms of being a creative producer, and people were stressed. Economy wasn't really in favor of what's going on from the business case. There was a lot of different things, and there was a lot of ambiguity that actually started putting me into flight or fight mode. Top leadership wasn't quite crystal clear on the strategic objectives. We couldn't find the right people, or I couldn't find the right people, let's say it this way, right? And things like this, you kind of go through these different experiences throughout the day that created a lot of opportunity for flight or fight. That put me in flight or fight. How do you know you're flight or fight? When you wake up at 3:30 in the morning, which I call devil's hour, and the first thought that comes to mind, the first thought is negative. It's like, oh my God, I should have not written this email. This is not good. I had the CEO on it. I had everybody on it. And what did I write again? And at 3:00 in the morning, you go and look at your phone. It's like, what? You go to the send box from your email, right? It says, what did I write? What did I say? Maybe it's not as bad. Did anyone respond yet? What did I say? If you find yourself doing that, you are dealing with burnout. You are getting really close to that, because now you're like the gazelle who's looking around. It's like, am I in trouble? Who's hunting me? Right? I just sent this email out and I don't know what's going to happen. So when you do that, or you check your phone every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes, some people do it every 5 minutes, you know that you're like the gazelle who's looking around right now and who is hunting you. And oftentimes, and here's the reality, oftentimes nobody's actually hunting you. It's just you kind of preconditioned yourself over some time, over prolonged time, because burnout doesn't happen overnight. It takes sometimes a year or two for burnout to really creep up, right? But you have preconditioned yourself to have a relationship with your environment that you believe that environment is inherently unsafe for you. I'm going to lose my job. Somebody's out to get me. We're all gonna get fired very soon, whatever it is. You are putting yourself in the state of mind. You did this. Nobody else did this. You did this to yourself. And in my case, I did it to myself. I put myself in a state of mind where things were no longer okay. And even though I knew it wasn't good for me, even though I knew I felt anxious all the time, blood pressure goes up and gaining excess weight, or, making unhealthy, dietary trade-offs, eating not good food, and so to speak. Those are all things we see. We make that decision, but for some reason, I failed to put things together. I just didn't have the knowledge what burnout really is. So sooner or later, it hit me really hard. I ended up in the hospital for 2 days with panic attack, and it was just not a good place to be. And that's when I really had to make a change, a really drastic change. This was when I knew, I said, I did something wrong, and I probably have been doing something wrong for a long time. So as part of my doctoral studies, I started digging into, burnout and just anxiety and stress and productivity and all these kind of things. And I also realized that I subscribed to the wrong YouTubers. So there's a lot of YouTube personalities out there that talk about stress management. And what do they tell you? Take some time off. Well, I did that, right? I took some time off here and there and these kind of things. But again, you go back in your habitat, you go back into your environment. Everything is waiting still for you. You didn't change the conditioning. You didn't recondition yourself. You just went into a resort, isolated, and then you came back into the same habitat. Burnout was still waiting for you, still the same environment. The people around me didn't change. At least the perception of the people around me didn't change that I had, right? So that was the thing. And so at some point, I knew I had to change something. And that's what I did. And so I changed this by doing a couple of things. I changed it to first reading the literature, and I mean the scientific literature. What is burnout? What is it really? What is it not? And then I started really reflecting deeply in like, who am I? Am I empathetic? Am I compassionate? Am I sympathetic? All these kind of things. Like, who am I, right? How do I deal with my environment? And then I kind of started really reflecting, what relationship do I have with the environment? And it was not a healthy relationship. Even with my boss, I didn't have a healthy relationship. It wasn't good. My boss had all sorts of ideas. It was very creative. And I was always like, we don't have time. We don't have resources. Like, this is not what we talked about 6 months ago. Why do you want to do that now? I didn't lean in. I wasn't a super fan of my boss. I wasn't a partner. I was more like, it's almost like, hey, there's Oliver, the break, not good. And so that builds a bad relationship. It's a bad relationship with my boss, with the environment. And I just didn't feel, myself anymore. And so I kind of wrote that down. And then the other thing I did is I stopped listening to the people that actually don't know what they're talking about online. And there's thousands of them out there, fancy videos. You find them on YouTube all the time. They tell you all the things. Do that, work out, or even quit your job. And that's not going to help you either. Sure, you can quit your job finally and get out of it. And sometimes maybe that's the last resort, but that's not a good thing because you still haven't learned how to deal with burnout. You go into a different environment, you're going to end up being the gazelle again, sooner or later, right? Because it's still you, yourself, who's making up a fictional scenario of a future that hasn't occurred yet, where you're thinking you're in danger, where in fact you are not in danger, right? Nobody sent you an email and said, Oliver, it really sucks what you're doing right now. You're in a pit. We want to get rid of you, right? And nothing of that nature ever happened. Matter of fact, they always told me, Oliver, you're doing great. Keep on going. This is fantastic. But I didn't hear that part, right? So I started listening. I stopped listening to those people, and I selected the right people that actually know what they're talking about burnout and things like this and productivity. And there's only a few of them. There's only a handful that I really like. And I also started developing a burnout quiz. And I'm actually giving that away for free. You can go to burnout.drdegnan.com and you can take the quiz for free. And I'm taking this quiz every month myself. It's a scientific quiz. It has a few questions. It takes 5 minutes to take. And it will tell you on a number of dimensions on where the risks are of getting closer to burnout, right? And there's tens of thousands of people already took that test over the past 2 years now. And it's a fantastic little tiny test that everyone can take and then just take action. I even give you advice on what to do in certain areas, how do you fix your sleep, or, how to fix your relationship with your environment and things like this. I put that all in there, right? But again, this is me, kind of feeding my happiness factor, so to speak, by helping others to not burn out anymore. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense and resonates, right? Burnout can be very complex, and it's easy to get caught in it. And nobody is immune from burnout. Even when you have all the knowledge, if you don't watch it, if you don't, know how to get data back and interpret those science properly, even though you might know what burnout is, you can still get caught in it. It's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned something there that I think is important, and that is that it's self-inflicted. We do this to ourselves.
Yeah.
So how do we self-inflict this? What's the number one way that we do this, that we get burnout?
So the other thing I started doing is I started surrounding myself with different people. The mistake I made throughout my career is, for some reason, because I'm a very compassionate person, so I like to help others. So when somebody complains to me about their boss or about the job, or they're just resentful about somebody, oftentimes I responded to it and I said, oh, really? That's not good. We got to fix this and things like that. I tried to help people. The problem with that, though, is those are people that were looking more for empathy versus compassion. And they start dragging you in. They start pulling you into their world. And that's not a good world. When you spend your time when you spend your time with people that actually complain and are resentful and what have you out there, you also become resentful. And sooner or later, you are accepting that as part of the environment, that you are finding yourself in an environment where it's not safe because somebody else says it's not safe. Somebody else has an issue with the environment and now they're resentful about their boss, their coworkers. They complain about vendors and customers and what have you. That is a bad mental place to be. So my recommendation is to get yourself out of that mental place. If somebody is trying to have a dialogue with you that is resentful in nature, that is complaining about somebody, that's complaining about the new boss, about the old boss, talking about running somebody under the bus, or talking to you about quitting. It's like, yeah, I got to get the hell out of here. This is just not good. And some people do that, and that's their way of potentially coping with their current situation. However, that's not you, and that's not me anymore. So what I did, I kind of said goodbye to those conversations. I didn't say goodbye to those people, but I said goodbye to those conversations. So anybody hitting me up on some resentful comments and things like this, I don't respond to it at all. And if I don't respond to that and I only respond to good stuff, I helping them to recondition themselves with their interaction with me, that they can only have positive interactions with me, not those negative, those emotionally negative connections. I don't build those at all anymore. So that's really critical. That's one of those things you got to be very careful about. So be careful who you hang out with. You will eventually become who you hang out with. So your top 3 people that you spend time with, and I'm not talking about your family, I'm talking about the top 3 people that you spend your time with. Make sure that they are content, that they're happy with what they're doing, that they're engaged, they're talking about good things all the time, not the bad stuff all the time, right? Sure, occasionally something bad happens, they might tell you about it, but even when they tell you about something bad has happened, they should be compassionate about it. It's like, hey, this happened, this really sucked, boy, but I'm glad we're behind it, and here's how we got past this, right? And if you hang out with people like that, as a result of that, the way you look at the environment, because those people become your environment, they become the relationship you have with your environment. And that you find that in your workspace. And when you hang out with people at work who are really compassionate, who are thrilled about being there, who look at failure as an opportunity, who are not worried about the future and saying, artificial intelligence, it's going to replace all the coders, all the developers we have here today, which is complete BS. It's not going to happen. You're not going to lose your job over that. The people that are going to lose their jobs are the people that are going to be replaced by people who know how to use AI, right? So learn AI, be excited about this, be thrilled about it. So hang out with people that you're really thrilled about, hanging out with, and that's just a good influence for you, right? That's really, really critical. The other thing is, watch what you consume in the news, okay? There's a lot of crap going on in the news right now. It's so sensationalized, especially in the United States here. It's so sensationalized. And, we got, new elections coming up soon, these kind of things. And I already know it's going to be a theater. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a blaming back and forth. So guess what my decision is? I'm not dialing in. Oh, I'm not dialing in. That sounds like I'm in charge. It sounds like I'm in charge of the environment I choose to build around myself. And this was a big wake-up call for me. I decide what it is I want to do. If I don't dial you in, you are dialed out. And that means you're not part of my environment, right? If I decide to talk with you about positive events versus negative events, I dialed you in and you're part of my environment, right? You're in charge. When it comes to burnout, you're really in charge. But then, you probably think, well, Oliver, I can't choose my boss. And if my boss is a micromanaging narcissistic maniac, that happens, yes. But it's up to you how you choose to interact with that, what you're making out of it. I've seen some very, very, impressive people that keep their cool under any scenario. And if they have somebody flipping out in front of them, they lean back and they build perspective on what is happening right now, but it doesn't touch them. Don't let it touch you, right? Easier said than done, but there are methods that I'm teaching on the level, up system for executive leaders, where you kind of just build perspective versus perception. Perception is when you let it kind of get into you, you're sympathetic about it, you almost take it personal, right? Perspective is like you're looking at everything from the outset. Oh, there's this little dog barking here. It's not my dog. It's not barking at me. It's just, it doesn't have patience right now, or the dog got scared about something that I can't control the dog's feelings, so to speak, right? So, and I'm also not in a position to, shush the dog and tell him to shut up. So the only option I have is let the dog bark, right? But it's a perspective you have. It's not no longer a feeling you have. It's no longer an emotion you have. And when you do something like that, when you start developing that skill, it's a skill that anybody can develop. It takes a little bit of time, but once you have it, those things can't touch you anymore. Focus on doing a good job. Focus on being in control of your destiny. Okay. Surround yourself with people that are good for you and build a healthy relationship with your environment. When you do that, you have conquered burnout.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's wrap this up with some resources, Dr. Degnan. You mentioned that you've got some folks that you follow. Who are you following? Who do you recommend we listen to, if we other than you, for who we can follow about burnout?
Okay, there's on YouTube, there's this wonderful vlog that I think every week a new one comes out. It's called The Diary of a CEO. And I forgot the author's name now. But I think he's in Great Britain somewhere. But every week he invites somebody else who actually wrote a scientific literature, wrote a book, like Simon Sinek and others. They wrote books, and he brings them to the podcast, and they just dissect that knowledge. And he's got a great way to interview people, and it's just like two and a half hours long sometimes, but I love watching him. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. So it's called The Diary of a CEO. The other one is Andrew Huberman, like him a lot. Now he's very scientific about his approach, and he talks, about all sorts of things in terms of, human, physical, and mental things, and these kind of things. And then the other thing I subscribe to is called Masterclass. Masterclass is an online streaming service that has a lot of these experts really deep diving into some of these topics, and I consume that on a very regular basis, and I love it. So those are my three primary channels that I kind of dial in, and then just keep an eye out. There are others out there too, but just keep an eye out for people that know what they're talking about, people that have like the academic background or are in the field, or actually they are real, executive leaders. Like I call myself the CIO from the trenches. I'm in the trenches every day. That's what I do. I'm not one of those people who never really succeeded as a C-level executive, and now I want to teach you how to be one. That's not good. Stay away from that. So when you consider your source, go to somebody, find somebody who has done it, who has been there for many years. I go back to Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. I want to find somebody who has at least 10,000 hours doing something, because at that point they have become the authority in it. They know the ins and outs. They stepped on all the landmines that you want to avoid stepping on. So find the people that have spent at least 10 years doing something and doing it really well, and also failed along the way. And look for those people who share openly, transparently, even their failures. What are some of the things that didn't work for them? And what was their realization out of that? That's what I'm looking for. So that's basically, that's my method to find the right source of information.
Wonderful. Well, friends, if you're listening and you're watching, I encourage you to get to know Dr. Oliver Degnan more. Go to drdegnan.com, Degnan. You can go to burnout.drdegnan.com to check out his quiz. And you can check him out on LinkedIn as well. He's got lots of great stuff. Oliver, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This was awesome.